Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Renee Mehrra, and today I'm joined by Dr. Joni Carley. She's an author of The Alchemy of Power, Mastering the Invisible Factors of Leadership. She's also a consultant advisor to many public and private sector companies on values-driven leadership, as well as an EcoSoft consultant with the United Nations in New York. Thank you very much, Dr. Carley, for joining us today. The Alchemy of Power, Mastering the Invisible Factors of Leadership. I think it says it all, but let's go back to the genesis of this book. I believe that you spent some time in the Amazon jungle, and that's where the seed was planted. So share with us on that.
Well, actually, the seed was planted long before that. I had always been a seeker, and I had done many spiritual things before then, and mostly leaned toward the Far East, and had done quite a bit of study in like Japan, Thailand, and this trip to the Amazon just called my name. I had to do it. And so I followed that, and I went from shaman to shaman in the high Andes to deep into the jungle, and stayed in the Amazon with the tribe of the Shuar, who are very fierce warriors, and depending on who you ask, may or may not still be headhunters, but they're very joyful people, in spite, really, as part of a cultural gestalt. I go into that in the book about how, they see us as more barbaric. But anyway, being there and really trekking the world to look at what is human potential, what causes what in the human condition, and how do we evolve into the best species we can be. And I've just, trekked the earth to try to figure that out, and I put a lot of what I've learned in the book.
Wow. And that also became one of the chapters in the book of Deepak Chopra and Jack Canfield, Stepping Stones to Success, Volume 1, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
I see. Now, when you talk about value-driven leadership, and we all want, because there are different styles of leadership, when we have from one side autocratic to authoritative to laissez-faire and everything in between, servant leadership as well. We're talking here about values-driven leadership, and we're talking about a new GPS to leaders, and and having these alchemical leaders. Now we're talking of two things over here: the power that leaders have, and also where they're coming from, the space of values. So how do we define power in a leader that is talking about and trying to cultivate not just in himself and herself values-driven morals and ethics, but also to the team that he is or she is being a leader to?
Well, first of all, let's talk about what power is. Power is the capacity to change one type of energy into another. It's the way to either cohere force or disrupt force, right? Power is, if you can bring force into coherence, you've got power. If you can disrupt forces, you've got power. And the quality of an energetic flow, the direction of an energetic flow, and the force of an energetic flow, that's what constitutes power, right? So energetic flow isn't just, gasoline going through a line or electricity coming through a wall. There's an energy that people have. I call it mojo, right? That's like that pizzazz, that power that in the jungle they call it a rutum. Is the spirit of the jaguar, and the jungle just pulses, and you can feel that so strongly there. But it's it's like we have all the ability to put all the elements of a grape into a lab dish, but we can't make a grape because we just don't know exactly how to manufacture this power. But we know we have it. We know we can cultivate it in people. And when leaders tap into that level of energetic flow, they've got exponential power, because that's where most power lies in the human experience. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I mean, to me, it does. Now, mojo management, we're talking mojo in the traditional terms, it's about talisman or good luck charm, but we're going deeper in. We're talking about mojo inside us and how do we manage that mojo.
Yeah, the Eastern religions call it chi or
Yes.
ki. It's Shakti in Hindu. It's, there's a lot of ways of thinking about it. An inner flame, an inner spark, a spark of life, and the Sufis really gave us some good advice to, as soon as you name it, that's not it. Actually, it wasn't the Sufis. Anyway, I think one of the Hindu religions, as soon as you try to name it, that's not it. That's a Tao. It's Eastern. So, this metaphysical territory, we will probably never fully understand it. But it's 95% of reality. Our physicists tell us we only understand 5% of reality. So we've got this other range. And the bridge between this metaphysical and the physical are values. Because when we value what we need, we value what we want. And, values reflect our consciousness. Consciousness is what makes stuff happen. Consciousness is causal. That's where the work is. And coherent consciousness, the group consciousness, as well as developing the leader's consciousness.
We're talking about individual consciousness, we're talking about collective consciousness, and we're now looking at global governance from the vantage point of higher state of consciousness. So we see that consciousness does intersect with global governance, and how do we actually function as alchemical leaders? So we're looking at cultivating alchemical leaders that are at a higher state of consciousness, more emotional intelligence, more intuition, more compassion and empathy, and working from the higher part of the brain, that they call it the neocortex. And then we're looking at the audience or who they are governing. Are they ready for this kind of a new world order where we are looking at truthfulness and humility and selfless service? These are great attributes, but
that new world order is emerging, whether people want to have it or not, and it's kind of a wave. But I want to back up a little bit and talk about what alchemy is, because we're talking about the alchemical leader, and there's a lot of misunderstanding about that. People think that alchemy is just the old time myth about turning lead into gold. But alchemy is really being able to make more than the sum of parts. So everybody does a little alchemy every day, right? But think of two leaders. They have the same basic resources in terms of how people are trained, how many they are, with the quality of workmanship. They have physical resources about the same, prices about the same. One produces an extraordinary product that beats expectations, that is profitable, and everybody's going out for pizza afterwards. The other one is in dysfunction. The product maybe doesn't dysfunction. The inner workings between the group is not functioning. So, you get like, what's the difference there? The difference is alchemy, is having, working from that level of consciousness to transform one thing into another. That's why alchemy of power, right? So to consciously transform, and the raw materials to do that with is everybody's mojo. Leaders are in a very interesting position because they've got a collective potential mojo, and it is so exponential. When mojo meets mojo, it's more than two mojos. So that's really what leaders need to be more conscious of, is that when values are being fulfilled, people tend to be more present, right? Part of mojo is just being there, being fully there. So values tend to, when people's values are suppressed or violated, they'll do what they have to, but they're going to really try to keep distance, right? Because it's not safe to have your values violated. The normal desire, humans want to expand, whether we're conscious or not. The nature of consciousness is that it always wants to grow, right? Our spiritual lives always want to take us to another place.
So we have collective mojos here as well. When you talk about values, or when we talk about ethics, the culture that we are living in, the environmental conditioning, and the acculturation to a culture that we're used to can sometimes become a deterrent, you feel, to moving ourselves to a higher state of
Not
consciousness?
sometimes. You're right on spot on the money here, because culture is where it's at. All of this stuff boils down to culture, right? So what culture is a leader building? Think of it like a culture in a lab dish. It's going to grow some things. It's not going to grow other things, right? So the alchemical leader is developing a culture, that invisible something called culture, which the building blocks of culture is values. So I work with a set of tools where we quantify culture by measuring values. And that way we bring real data. You know, I like the yin and the yang. I like the consciousness work, but I like the data. I like, to see where we are with things. So we can actually measure that. But that accountability for culture is the bottom line. Peter Drucker said culture eats strategy for breakfast, right? And it's determinant of everything, of absolutely everything.
Right. So we have to actually inculcate a culture that is conducive to our values and to morals and ethics that we're talking about. And you do a lot of public speaking. I do a lot of United Nations, just like you. What do you see? What has been your experience in terms of Mojo management, in terms of global governance intersecting with higher state of consciousness and alchemical leaders?
Well, you're seeing more and more realization that we have to work at deeper levels. So when I got into this area of work 25 years ago or more, into spiritual life long before that, but bringing it to professionals and onto like a UN, into bigger platforms. In the beginning, I kind of had to keep a firewall between that kind of conversation and the conversation of leadership. It was, you could really lose traction if you were on the wrong elevator in the wrong conversation at the UN, somebody could lose their career track. So, but that's not true anymore. Now there really has been a cultural awakening, a cultural, we're at cultural emergence, right? It's something that's has been and will be unfolding over time, but some people call it a paradigm change. And it's recognizing that, what in my book I call it the fluffy myth. So we've had this mythology that we're all acculturated with, and it says that all this invisible stuff like consciousness and mojo and culture and all that, that's just inconsequential fluffy stuff. The only thing real is the numbers and the products, and but there's just no data whatsoever to back that fluffy myth up, yet we all kind of have it in us somewhere. And what has been happening is recognition that not only is that not fluff, it's where the answers are. It's where the power is. It's where capacity, developing capacity in that territory is the key to really exponentiating power.
And Joni, you rightly said we all have the data. The soul has it. But somewhere there's been the deterrence, the mind, and living our life in a different way. And I think when we dive deep inside ourselves, and we look at the innate quality of our heart and our soul, and through meditation, through self-introspection and deep reflection, we understand our true nature, that we all one. But we forget it somewhere. Like what you said, the data is there, but we are not getting there. So, the journey is towards that, It's not the destination, but it's the journey out there.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. And everybody is where they are on that journey. I think that's part of it, is just the grace of appreciating where each one of us is.
Absolutely. What do you see life beyond COVID? We can have more alchemical leaders and more of global governance that is based on power that is coming from a higher state of consciousness, those non-physical elements that we're talking about, those metaphysical elements, the ancient wisdom intersecting over here. Do you see that in the life beyond COVID?
Yeah, I mean, these things exist in the United Nations Charter of its existence, in the Declaration of Human Rights. We have these first principles. They're in every religious practice, and so it's all there, and it's all really what people want in their hearts. They want, values are more compelling of our behavior than even our genetics, according to twin studies. I mean, they are what drive us. They're what stoke our mojo, right? If I'm getting a value of, part of a value for me is fun. If I'm getting to go out, I'm stoked, right? Part of my value is making a difference. If I've got my really engaged with a client, it stokes my mojo, to work with at that level. And so that's part of it, is just appreciating that and recognizing that when the human spirit soars, all kinds of good things happen. Social indicators go up, profits go up, share prices go up, stakeholder loyalty goes up. It's not so esoteric. The data is good of what that this is worth it. It's just that we're so acculturated to believe that it's not. You want full spectrum, right? You want to have the profits. You want to have the good relationships. That's what we measure. We measure 7 levels when we measure culture. From the bottom line, is everybody safe? Are the profits coming in? Are the lights on? And we're good. And then to relationships through best practices. And the 7th level is universal greatest good. And what we find is organizations can get very stuck and not grow past a pretty low ceiling because they keep functioning at these kind of lower levels under the, again, mythology that if they take time to do that other stuff, it will take resources out of that just get the donuts made kind of mentality. But the truth that just doesn't bear out. What we find is when organizations are more full spectrum and leaders themselves are more full spectrum, that's when their numbers are the best.
So what are some of the 4 metaphysical strategies that you coach to in the private and public sector to leaders who want to be alchemical leaders?
Well, I consult with what's up for them, right? And they know I bring a certain set of skills and lenses to the table. I often start with a values assessment because I think it's a really good place to get just a good database. And it depends on what's going on for them. For some people, it's through some transitions. For some people, it's really to just stay on the cutting edge, that have somebody that's objective, that like a coach for a high level athlete is more how I work. So, I certainly work through fixing enough problems, but I'm not like I'm more forward motion and reorganization sometimes, just a way for someone to step back and look at what's going on here and what do I want to do about it.
So after Alchemy of Power, what's next?
Well, I'm still involved with a lot of things at the United Nations. And I have a novel that I've started here and there over the years, but I love what I'm already doing, which is consulting and UN work and speaking, and I also do some spiritual work. So
you want to stoke the mojo more and have another book as a sequel to the Alchemy of Power?
I'm not drawn to writing a sequel right now, but I am thinking about doing a master class. In fact, I have it mostly done. I just really need to get it finished and posted. But I do want to do a master class to dig down a little bit more into working with consciousness. But the book, The Alchemy of Power, every single chapter ends with leadership reflections. And so it's, this stuff can sound esoteric, but the book is really about applying all of this to what's on your desk right now and what's on your mind right now. And so it takes you through from the beginning, which is real, just kind of unpacking this stuff. And I use yin and yang, and I use that as a way of looking at some of the energetics that we're talking about. And the second part is about applying it, making it real in your life. And so what, how does it help to know this, the alchemy? And the third part of the book is about, this is where the world's going. We have already tipped into a new paradigm, a new way of thinking. There's talk of not just talk, but there's offices of transformation at the United Nations. The entire world is saying something's got to change here. And something big has to change. And so that's already happening. And leaders are going to find themselves blindsided by their own just obscurity. Like they're going to be all of a sudden if they don't realize how much the world is changing and how much the world is saying we want a better world by leaders building better workplaces, if they don't hear that, they're going to be blindsided by their own irrelevance. Because that's where we're going, and that's what works statistically. That's what works.
Right. From the dust of the leaders to the hearts for a new world order, for a new paradigm shift to a higher state of consciousness. That is so very essential. And to be in harmony with nature. That's what every scripture would say. All ancient wisdom talks about it. Once we're in harmony with nature, once we are aligned with the higher frequencies of ours, I think we'll have a better world, each one of us. Because we want to change the world, we got to change ourselves first. And I think that's what sages, saints, and mystics have said that. And I think if we, follow that philosophy, I think we'll all be transformed into better human beings and living in a higher state of consciousness.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Joni Carley, author of The Alchemy of Power, Mastering the Invisible Factors of Leadership. She's also a consultant advisor to many private and public sector companies, as well as EcoSoc consultant with the United Nations in New York. And I want to leave you all with one quote that has always inspired me and empowered me from a saint, mystic, and spiritual master of the 20th century, St. Paul St. Jesus said, "Be good, do good, be one." I'm Dr. Renee Mehrra. Thank you so much for watching. And if you like the video, please share and subscribe. Until we meet again, stay healthy and stay positive.